Do you just want to accept the risk that you currently have in your current job and in your career? Or do you want to go your own way and choose your risk? Imagine for the next 25 years, you will have to do that day in and day out. And try and imagine where that will lead you. What kind of person you will become if you force yourself to do something that you really don't like, that really drives you nuts. In the end, is it worth it to live like this? There was another comment on one of my videos that not everyone can afford to change careers or leave their job to do something else, that it's a luxury to change careers, that it's just too risky, and how can you do that if you have responsibilities? Not everyone can afford to do that, and so on. And I can completely understand where those people are coming from, and you might also have similar concerns. It's not that easy. I have a family, I have dependents, I have responsibilities, I have my bills. I can't just leave just because I can't stand it, because I don't like my job, to do something else that wouldn't be responsible. And here in this episode, I want to dive a bit deeper into this train of thought. I just want to offer you a different perspective on this. Of course, it's not as easy, but on the other hand, if you don't change careers, if you don't change your job, and you decide to stay in a job that you don't really like, that totally annoys you, that drives you crazy, that also has a price. Don't be mistaken and think there is no price to staying in a job that you despise, and that there is no risk to staying in a job, in a career that you don't like. Even though you think that staying in your current job at your current company is something that is stable and secure, and it will provide you with a steady income for years to come, how can you know? It might not be the case. I mean, your company can let you go at any time if they don't want you, or if there's some restructuring or reorganization going on in the company, or if something happens in the economy that just forces the company to let you go. There is no such thing as absolute security, even at the company that you work for. It is false to say that it is safe to stay where you are, and that it is much more riskier to change jobs or change your career. But I just want to emphasize that whether you stay where you are or you change your job, there will always be some kind of risk. But the question now is, do you just want to accept the risk that you currently have in your current job and in your career? Or do you want to go your own way and choose your risk? And of course, everyone knows that along with higher risk comes a possibility of a higher reward. So if you want that higher reward, if you want the chance at a more fulfilling and meaningful career, and thus a more fulfilling and meaningful life, then usually there is some risk involved on the way to that. And there's also a price, and there's also some sacrifice. And now let's get to the question. Is it a luxury to change your career? Is it a luxury to change your career, and how can I afford it? And by the way, I totally get it. I totally understand why people think this way. I'm not belittling them. I'm not trying to make fun of them, but I just want to challenge them to really rethink, what does it actually mean if you're saying changing careers is a luxury? A luxury is something that you do not really need. You just want. It's just something that usually brings you more pleasure, more delight, and maybe does something for your prestige. It's an additional bonus to have, but it's not something that you need to survive. Like, for example, if you go on a trip, if you go traveling, what you need is certainly accommodation, right? And that could be like a simple 2-star hotel or motel, I don't know, like a Best Western, or you stay at a more luxurious place like the Sheraton or Marriott, and that would be the definition of luxury. You do not need it, but it's an added bonus. If you change your job or change your career, is that a luxury or not? The answer to that will depend on whether or not you think that having a job or a career that you like, that you enjoy, that you find meaningful, is a necessity, is a basic need or not. And that is something that only you can answer. And I'm not saying that there is a definite answer to this either. I'm not saying that it's yes or no, because it depends very much on your own belief system, your priorities, and of course your particular situation. And in fact, if you're struggling just to find a place to live And if every day you have to ask yourself, what will I eat today? Will I have enough money to feed my children? And will my children be able to go to school? Or I don't know, will I be able to buy medicine and so on? Then yes, you are in fact struggling. And if you're in that kind of situation, then indeed thinking about changing careers might be a luxury, yes. Because what changing careers means, in effect, is that you need to sacrifice some time. You need to invest some time. That's the better word. You need to invest some time to prepare to transition to this new career. And that is by either getting some kind of certificate or another education or training or, I don't know, volunteering or doing an unpaid internship and so on. And all of these things are things that are usually not paid, right? On the contrary, you usually need to pay to do these things, not internships, but I mean getting another education or doing some training, for example. You have to invest something into it. You have to invest resources. That could be money, time, and energy. And if you're in that kind of situation that I described earlier, where you are truly struggling, where you cannot even meet your very, very basic needs, then of course changing careers is a luxury. Now, changing jobs is a different thing, because while changing careers needs a larger investment and there is a higher risk attached to it, although the reward is also higher, changing jobs is not necessarily a risk. It's only a risk if you quit your job cold, meaning that you don't have anything else lined up, and only then start looking for a job. In that case, of course, then that would be a huge risk. But if you change jobs and it's continuous, meaning that you wait until you get an offer, a signed contract with another company, and then you leave your job, then there's almost no risk involved there, right? Except if by the time you leave your job, that new company tells you that, okay, we've changed our minds, we're not going to take you, then that could represent a small risk. But in general, switching jobs is not a risk. And normally people would only change jobs if the new job is better than the old one, meaning more suitable to their personality or pays better or has better working conditions and so on. So changing jobs usually comes with an upgrade, right? So in that sense, changing jobs is definitely not a luxury, whereas changing careers, yes, that might be the case. Okay, so that was my review, my analysis, if we're talking about people who are truly struggling to meet their very basic needs. But now let's get to the majority group of people, and you are likely, I think, to fall into this group of people who have already passed the threshold of your basic needs. You are no longer struggling to buy food for yourself. You have some kind of health insurance, either from the government or through your private health insurance, and you have a place to live. And it doesn't matter if that's a 2-bedroom apartment, whether you're staying with a friend, your roommates, or you're still living with your parents. It doesn't matter as long as you have a place to live. Then I would say that you are no longer struggling to meet your basic needs. You are no longer in a survival stage. And if you're no longer in a survival stage, you can actually afford to change jobs, for one, certainly. And you can also certainly afford to change careers. It is not a luxury, because you have already met your basic needs. You have already met your basic needs and you have already secured them. So now you can go on to the next step and ask yourself, what is it that would provide meaning to my life? What would fulfill me in my job? But let's also look at it from a completely different perspective. Let's go back to the first question, where I ask whether or not changing careers is a necessity or not, whether it's a basic need or not. Well, it really depends on what that career that you are currently in, that you are currently pursuing, or that job does to you. If your current job, if your current career drives you crazy, drives you nuts, and you feel you are completely incompatible with that career to the point that you feel constantly burned out, you feel constantly stressed, you feel a lot of anxiety, and you feel really tortured by that job to the point that you maybe even experience depression and you become highly irritable, and it also changes the way you interact with your family, with the people that you love, and if it also affects your health, especially if it not only affects you on an emotional level, but it also gets to you on a physical level, meaning that you get physically sick from your job, then you need to get out of there. Then you need to make a change. You need to change your job. You need to change careers. In that case, it is no longer a luxury. Yes, it might still be a risk to change careers. And let me just give you a concrete example. Let's just say that you work as an investment banker and you're paid very well. You even get bonuses or commissions or whatever, and you have more than enough for yourself and your family. You're able to pay for a mortgage, for a house, and buy a car, and you're also saving up for your kids' education. From a financial perspective, you're well taken care of. It's really clear what you do for work as a career, and you have a sense of identity in society. You have some prestige because you have this title and this position and everything. Then on the other hand, you feel that this job is really making you sick because you feel it just doesn't suit your personality. And it might not just be the job and the task itself, but it might be the whole working environment. The working environment might, for example, be very competitive or hostile, and it's very high pressure, and it gets to you on an emotional level, but also it gets to your physical health. In that case, I do not think that it's a luxury to change careers. I think that, on the contrary, you really have to make that change. And the reason is because you need to realize that doing work that you either love or not love, because you're spending so much time doing that, will produce what is called externalities. Externalities are side effects that no one is really aware of, oftentimes not aware of, and that no one really accounts for and pays for. So those are externalities, are the things that I mentioned before. Those are effects that the job or your career has on your mental health, on your physical health, on your overall happiness and well-being, on your relationship with your spouse and with your kids. Let's say that you're in this job that you really hate and that really irritates you, and you really don't want to be there, but you feel that you just have to go there every day. What happens is that at the end of each day, you come home to your family and you always feel very irritated, upset, and annoyed and angry, and you need an outlet, right? And in the end, what will happen is that you let it out on them. So that's one form of externality. But another externality is also that you'll try to compensate. And what people oftentimes do is that they compensate for their unhappiness by consuming more things. They buy more things, flashier things. They consume goods and also services to save time, of course. So in the end, you have to ask yourself, net, is it worth it? Although I'm earning so much money, I'm earning so much in commissions and in my salary and added benefits and so, but on the other hand, I'm spending way more money beyond my basic necessities. And I also have all these externalities, health problems, mental health problems, and negative effects on your relationships with your family, and all these binging on and consumption and so on. So in the end, is it worth it to live like this? And I think that the answer is no. And at this point, you might ask me, okay, I really don't like my job and I do really want to change careers, but what about my responsibilities? What about my bills? And so I can't just let go. It's not that easy. I can't just go off and do whatever I want, right? And that is what is basically in some of the comments. I totally feel for them, and I get why they are frustrated and why they are perhaps venting a bit, because they actually do not like their job and they want to find a way out of it, but they're really so convinced 100% that there is no way out, that they just have to stick in the career that they perhaps chose at age 18 or maybe 23 or 25, and they stuck with it for 10 years, and they feel because they've invested so much time and effort and energy and their education into it, they need to stick with it, and they just don't have the courage to think outside of it. And yeah, I would, if you feel that way too, if you have this kind of train of thought too, first of all, I want to tell you that I totally understand where you're coming from, and I understand the difficulties, because I used to be in that kind of position too. I also used to be in a job and in a career that I didn't like. It really didn't fit with my personality and the whole working environment and so on. First of all, I want to say that changing careers is not always the first solution. It might come to that, but before you go there, you can try and explore other things. You can try and explore what really bothers you about your current job, and you can make some small micro improvements there that have a smaller risk. For example, you can consider whether you're perhaps already in the right industry. Perhaps you like the industry, you find it interesting, but you are not in the right role. For example, even though you work in finance, you do not necessarily have to be an investment banker. You could work in retail banking, or you could even work in the HR or learning and development department, or in the strategic business management department. There's so many department functions and roles in each company, especially the bigger companies. So that is something that you can explore with your HR or simply by looking at the organization chart. And if looking at that you still feel that no, it doesn't do it. I mean, I like the industry, but I don't really like the working environment in this company, or you don't really like the company culture, the corporate culture, because each company has their own corporate culture. In that case, I would advise you to try and look out to other companies. Try to see where else you can work. You've already accumulated so much experience and knowledge in this company, and it could be very useful and valuable at another company. And another company might even be willing to pay you more for the same amount of hours, or they might pay you the same amount, but you don't have to work as many hours if, for example, the workload is a problem. So that's something that you need to explore. And if you've gone through this analysis, through this review, and you still feel that, okay, it's not the industry, it's not the working environment, it's not just the role or the corporate culture or the colleagues or your boss or everything, but you feel that there's something much more basic, much more fundamental, then you need to dig deeper. Then you need to start asking yourself, okay, what is it about this kind of job or this kind of work that I do on a daily basis that just really doesn't suit me, just really doesn't suit my personality? I mean, in every job, we apply a certain set of skills, right? And it's quite distinct from job to job. You might just not like to use these kind of skills in your particular job and career now. Then in that case, you need to ask yourself, what are the favorite skills that you actually like to apply? And it could be the case that it turns out that you don't like working with Excel, but you do enjoy the part where you collaborate with people, where you work with people on new ideas. In that case, you need to find another career where you get to do these kinds of activities, where you get to apply these kinds of skills more. And back to the question, okay, now I know what I actually want to do. Let's say that I want to be a graphic designer instead of working as an investment banker. But still, I can't afford it. It's a luxury because I would need to learn a bit about graphic design. That would take me some time, even though I might have dabbled a bit with it in my free time, and I might need to get, some certificate or some training, and then I need to find a new job, and then I might start from the bottom again, and so on. And to that, I would say, yeah, it takes time. It's not something that happens overnight. It's not like, okay, I don't like my job, tomorrow I'll hand in my resignation and then I'll just leave it and then I'll work on my new thing, right? No, it's not like that at all. So I think those people who have these fears and these naysayers about career change, they think that if you change your career, you just leave everything behind and you just let go of all your responsibilities and then you go do whatever you want. But that's not the case. Of course, you need to have a solid plan. And how solid the plan has to be will, for one, depend on your risk appetite, your risk tolerance, meaning how far you are able to take risk and willing to deal with risk and the consequences. But on the other hand, of course, it will depend on your particular financial situation and whether or not you have dependents. Like, for example, if you have saved up a lot of money, you have a lot of investments, then you can afford to take a bit more risk because you have this backup. And on the other hand, if you have dependents, if you have kids, if they're still small, then of course you have more to think about, you have more to consider. That means that you might need much more time to enable that career change. So for a single person who doesn't have any responsibilities at all, it could mean, if they wanted to change careers, that they just hand in their resignation and then they stop 2 weeks from now and they go on a vacation for 6 months and then figure it out later, right? They can't afford it because they're just responsible for themselves. But if you have a family, if you have dependents, whether that's your kids or your parents, then yeah, it will take you longer. It might take you 1 year. It could take you 2 years, it could take you 3 years, and if you want to do a very drastic career change, it could even take you 5 years. But it doesn't matter, because in the end, it can eventually happen. You just need to plan for it for the long term. And it will still be worth it, because let's just say that now you are 40 years old. And if nothing extraordinarily happens, you will continue working until you're, let's say, 65. So that means for another 25 years. If you don't do anything about the career that you hate, the job you hate now, and you just resign and you just accept that, okay, I can't do anything, it's a luxury, I can't afford it, and you choose to just stay in that job, then imagine for the next 25 years, you will have to do that day in and day out. And try and imagine where that will lead you. What kind of person you will become if you force yourself to do something that you really don't like, that really drives you nuts. So I really think that it's worth it spending those 5 years on the side while working in your job, planning your career change as smoothly as possible. So when the time comes, you have enough emergency savings saved up, and you will have also managed your budget by that time. So this is also a very important thing. Many people say that they are not able to change their careers, they're not able to afford it because their living standard has become so high and so bloated. This is obviously not the case for people who are struggling and living at a minimum sustenance level. But for all those of us who have enough money to go on a vacation once or twice a year, to subscribe to Netflix, to buy some organic food once in a while, to go to the movies, and to buy new clothes. For all those of us who live that way, we are able to afford it. The reason that we might not be able to afford it is if we keep living at that high living standard. So that is actually one of the important keys. If you want to really change your career, you have to really take a look at your expenses, at your living standard. Are you perhaps living at a living standard that is far beyond what you actually need? I'm not saying that money cannot buy happiness at all. In fact, it can buy happiness, and there is a study on this. I don't remember the exact amount, but I think money can buy happiness up to a certain point of $70,000 or $75,000 per year. Up to a certain level, money can increase your happiness because it can buy you conveniences, and it can buy you little pleasures here and there, and it can upgrade the quality of your life. But beyond that level, it won't be able to do much for you. Of course, for everyone it's different, right? But beyond that number, you will really only get very small increments in happiness. And after that, I don't think that the money that you spend will bring you more meaning and more fulfillment to your life. After you've passed that threshold, after you've passed that certain living standard, buying a more expensive, lipstick or some makeup, or upgrading your car to a slightly better car, or moving into a slightly nicer neighborhood, it will only increase your happiness by so much. And after that, you will get accustomed, you will get used to your new living standards. So there's no end to it. And I'm sure you heard of this term lifestyle inflation or lifestyle creep, right? The more money you earn, the more money you spend, and then you get used to that level. And after you've gotten used to that level of spending, you feel that you need to increase your spending even further because you're practically numb to the effects of those consumer goods or those services that you buy. Yeah, so I think that for the majority of people listening to this podcast, I would say that most of you are likely to be beyond that minimum sustenance level. And if you think that you are not, then do let me know in the comments below. I would be really interested here. But I would really suggest to you to review your spending habits and your budget, and look at, do I really need these things? Do they really bring me happiness? Are they really meaningful to me or not? Or could I, instead of spending my money on those things, perhaps put some money aside for a possible career change? Or just even maybe to take a break from all of this for a few months, because the value of that can be immense. I know that it takes a lot of sacrifice. It takes a lot of time to change careers. I mean, I experienced that firsthand, but I can also say that it was really worth it. I used to work in banking. I think many of you know it, perhaps from my other channel. And I also used to have a very good income and a steady income, a big bonus, and so on. But it really couldn't buy me happiness. On the other hand, at some point I burned out, and it did really nasty things to my physical and mental health. So I chose to leave my job and my career, and this was after planning. It was not a spontaneous decision. So I thought about this about 2 years before I left my job and career, and then I started really getting into planning, saving up money 1 year before it, and then there was the time I finally left my job and my career, and since then I've never looked back. So for those of you listening to this, if you're really intent on changing your career, if you don't want to stay where you are, I just want to let you know that it is possible, whether or not you have a family, you have dependents or not. As long as you are already past that minimum sustenance level, you're no longer struggling simply to stay alive and find food to eat. Back then I too had dependents. I don't want to get into too much detail because it still feels a bit too personal to me, but I had people in my family relying on me financially to some extent. So that was also something that I had to consider very carefully, and it didn't come easy to, but it was manageable in the end. And this is also something that I think you should really keep in mind. One of the reasons that you might be really hesitating to change your career, leave your job and take some risk, start a business, and so is because you might be thinking of people who are relying on you financially. And I think in some cases, it's really a right thing to do, that you really think this through in detail, because if people are relying on you financially for their livelihood, or maybe they have a medical condition and really rely on your help, then you really need to plan it out very carefully so you don't suddenly drop that support. But let's say that, okay, I want to be careful about this because there are serious situations like I just mentioned right now, where you have people relying on you because of a medical condition. They can no longer support themselves, and then you have kids who are still underage who definitely rely on your support. So this is one situation that you obviously have to take care of, no matter if you change jobs or change careers. So whatever you do, you need to keep this running, right? But then there's another kind of situation where people rely on you. This is hard to say. There are situations where people rely on you, whereas they are already in a position to take care of themselves. And I see this a lot, especially in my own home country, a lot in Asian countries, especially where people are already adults. They are already over 18, over 20, and they are still relying financially on their parents. And I completely understand this. When I first started studying at university, I studied in Germany. For the first year, my parents, for the first or 1.5 years, my parents also supported me because it was tough in the beginning. But soon after, I was working 3 part-time jobs, and I was working during the semester breaks, and I finally got to a point after about 1 year plus where I could finance myself. So I was no longer a burden to my family. But what I see in a lot of families, perhaps not just in Asia, but all over the world, there are those kinds of parents who are really spoiling their kids. And I know they don't mean to spoil their kids, but they are supporting their kids so much. They are so afraid that their kids won't make it on their own, and that they have to support them financially, that they pour so much money into them, into their education, and they support all their living expenses and so on. And that is not necessarily always a good thing either for the kids, right? Because at some point they need to learn to become independent. So that's one disadvantage for the kid, for the children, for not even children, I mean for these adults who are not really adults yet. But on the other hand, it's also a big burden to you. I mean, of course you have a responsibility to take care of them up to a certain age, but at some point you need to shift that responsibility back to them. And this is just an example, kids, right? It could be other people in your life who depend on you financially, and it's okay for a certain amount of time, but it just can't go on forever. At some point you have to think of your own needs. For example, your need to change careers, and you need to discuss that with them, and you need to either shift the responsibility, the burden back, or you need to find a way to maybe divide the burden or divide the responsibility. So on one hand you can still support those people, but on the other hand you also don't toss all your dreams away, and you don't keep suffering in your current situation. So I hope that listening to this now, you might have a bit of a different take on whether or not changing careers is truly a luxury or not. And can hopefully also change your view a bit about whether or not you can afford this. If you are still struggling with this, or you are finding a way to make this work, I would really love to know about your current situation. You can tell me in the comments below and I'll try to get back to you. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate you being here, and see you again in the next episode.